off all cell phones or put them on vibrate. We'll begin this evening with the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit. Does anyone have any questions on the Committee on Education? Mrs. Khaleesi.
Just on number one, I was just curious, this Apple workshop, it's for one day?
Yes.
That's a lot of money for one day. Is that including traveling and,
Yes, it is.
okay, and will the teachers be paid for being there?
No.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, are there any questions on the Committee on Business? No? All right, thank you, Mrs. Spear. We will move on to the Pittsburgh information, and the first thing we have a walk-on number 2A, Dr. Lippert. It's in your pink folder.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Hazuda. If everyone goes to the pink folder. In here. The walk-on is asking the board to approve a contract with Hip Hop on Lock. It's an organization that will work with all of Pittsburgh King 7th grade students to strengthen and develop leadership skills through the production of a CD. So they work 1 day per week for a 9-week period in their general music class, and it will culminate with development of their own CD, and they'll have a performance around that.
Thank you, Dr. Lippert. All right, we have numbers 1, 2, and 2A on the pink pages. If there are any questions, Mr. Brentley, will start with you. Mrs. Khaleesi.
And I apologize, I had to step out for a second. Is there anything in here, you already talked about these? Is that what you did? Okay, thank you.
Dr. Hawley.
Not at this time.
Mr. Eisler.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. Dr. Lippert, why is this a walk-on? Why is it coming to us late?
This was an opportunity that came to Pittsburgh King just this week, and they didn't want to miss the opportunity, so they asked us to bring it to you and not wait. If we waited until April, it would be retroactive, so they asked us to bring it to you tonight.
Thank you. Thanks, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you. Mr. McCray.
No, good.
Ms. Shealy.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. Just a couple on item 2A. I believe that we've had other contracts with Hip Hop on Lock. Is this listed as new because this is new to King versus new to the district?
That's correct.
And I would believe that all of the 7th grade students at King are not Medicaid eligible, but it's okay to, and this might be from Mr. Weiss, it's okay to pay for this out of the Medicaid money? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter.
No questions at this time.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on to payments authorized, number 3 and 4 on the blue pages. Mr. Brentley, we'll start with you. You know what? I just saw this, everyone was given this flyer for the All-City Art Showcases, and that is dealing with number 3. This is what will be mailed out to our families. An exciting event. Okay, all right, go for it, Mr. Brentley.
Number 3, this is the 16th Annual African American CAS, right? Payments authorized? 3 and 4. Did you say 3 and 4? Oh, it is or it isn't?
It's number 4.
Okay, that's what I, isn't that it? CAS, the Annual African American CAS? Yeah, right, that's the one. Who's handling that? Who was the contact? Okay, just a quick question. Are we seeing, Ms. Ripper, any kind of increase at all in this CAS program among African Americans?
Yes, we are.
Can you generalize?
I'd have to get that information for you from Allison, but
Okay.
I will get that to you.
Okay, so that it can clearly be seen as a sign that it's growing in terms of the CAS. They're reaching out, and it's also would be helpful to see if we can pinpoint what we were able to do to increase the numbers from last year or 3 years so that we can kind of continue to go.
Yes, Allison's been working on that, and we're seeing great increases.
Beautiful. And this is still under the leadership of Dr. Walters?
Yes,
he involved?
the CAS, correct.
Great, great. Okay, well, that's good to
Right.
know. I'd love to see the numbers or hear the
Okay.
numbers. Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Khaleesi? Dr. Hawley?
No.
Mr. Icer?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Azuda. On both of these, I know that, and you talked about the large postcard we got with all the events which are taking place at a number of venues, including Kappa, the August Wilson Center, and Manchester Craftsman. I think it is a wonderful event. I know that parents of students go. I would encourage everybody to try to attend to see how talented all of our students are district-wide. And on number 4, is that open to the public or not?
We're gonna have to check on that, but
If you
Get
would,
back
and
to
if it is, because it really is a very, very impressive event. All these leadership things we do with students are very impressive, and if it is open to the public, I think it's great that we invite the public to come see, again, the work our students are doing. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you, Mr. Icer. Mr. McCray? No. Ms. Shealy?
Thank you, I'm sorry for the delay. And I can't find it. Is the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild is donating their space for the All City Arts Showcases?
this number 3 is actually, Manchester Craftsman Guild is a partner with us, but number 3 is actually having you approve the fact that the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust, it's the first time that they're donating space to us. And in order to have that donated space, that what we're asking you to authorize is payment for the security and additional cleaning. But Manchester does in fact, and has for many years, partnered with us with their space when we do the award ceremony.
So I guess a big thanks to the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild is in order
Yes.
for their continued support of our All City Arts Showcase. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Shealy. Mr. Sumter?
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. Just a note that the All City Arts Showcase, one of the venues is the Manchester Craftsman Guild, and we recently eliminated the funding for their after-school program. So if we're going to be a partner, let's be a partner all the way and find a way to help fund that after-school program, because a lot of the work that's done in that program feeds right into this type of arts showcase, the type of activities that take place there. So when we're talking about being a partner, it's not good to chop off one hand and just work with the one that's left. Let's make them a full partner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. We'll move on to general authorizations, numbers 5 through 14 on the yellow sheets. Mr. Brentley, we'll start with you.
I have just a general question for number 13, and that is, at that time, the staff will be bringing forward the recommendations for this school. Am I correct? The recommendations for both schools for renewal.
Yes, I do believe that is correct.
Okay.
This,
And we have, in terms of a district, have already communicated to both schools our recommendations and process and procedures for when we vote on the items?
yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all I wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Khaleesi?
Thank you. And number 6, this is a contract for brown paper tickets. I think that name is so cool. But I was wondering, how was this done before? This is for tickets for Kappa, for I guess their shows. I'm not quite sure what it exactly is for, to be honest.
Dr. French will answer this question.
Before that, they had a vendor who did this service before, and they believe that this new vendor can offer expanded opportunities and better service than the prior contract. It was ProArts Ticket Service was the prior vendor.
So like for what? All the shows all year long? How, I don't,
So it's it would not be for students. So students would not be charged, but it would be for tickets over $10 for parents who might want to use a credit card from home, so that they don't have to come in. You can still come in and buy the ticket. For people who want to use it, just like we use it to go to certain events, it's a call-in service. You can use your credit card to purchase tickets for events at Kappa that are over $10. It would only be for select events. If you didn't want to incur the surcharges, you can always get the tickets at the door, and no child would be subject to any of these surcharges.
So, okay, that's the part that wasn't clear. So when they buy the ticket through brown paper tickets, they're gonna pay more and the company's making the money. And how did that work before? Did some company make the money before too?
It did, and they offered fewer options. So it's just a better company. They can offer more services, but the other company did, it was the same service the other company did also charge a fee, and that's how they.
Is this simply to have the ability to use electronic?
Yes, and this is what the parents had requested and the community had requested, to make it easier, because there are a lot of events at Kappa. It's just, instead of people coming in to buy the tickets, they can now do it from the comfort of their home.
I guess my only other question would be is, did they just take this company and they didn't look to see any others? Did they do an RFP? Did they do anything of that sort?
I'm afraid I'd have to make up an answer, so I'm not going to.
Good.
So all I do know is that this one is better than the other one.
Janine, at least you're honest, man.
But I will get to you about how this happened.
Thank you.
But I had a little detail.
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Just the previous contract, because we were all involved in this one, Pro Arts, they charged a 15% service charge. And Brown Paper Tickets charges a 3.5% service charge. So that's one of the reasons why they chose Brown Paper Tickets, because Pro Arts service charge was so much more at 15% than the 3.5.
Yeah, you know what I'm thinking in my head, and I mean, I might be completely off on this one, but I'm thinking that it's going to be like an e-ticket, and you're going to just end up printing it out yourself. And I'm thinking, isn't this a great way to, I mean, you have these artistic kids that, why couldn't they do that themselves? But I guess the bank part would be the issue. I mean, that would be the only issue, I think. The connection with the bank to do it. Because it would be great if the business CTE program would learn how to do something like this, and why not make the 3.5% that goes back into the system? But I know, I'm thinking beyond. Number 7, I was just wanted to say, I hope that this trip that Dr. Gugumu is taking, the world language teacher at Alderdice is taking the students, I hope they enjoy themselves and they have a wonderful, safe trip. The same with number 8, it sounds like a great idea, hope it works well. And I was pretty impressed with number 12. This sounds so unbelievable. It's good stuff, and I really don't want to be the person to talk about it. And I thought maybe if you wanted to give me, brag.
I'm stealing Mr. McCray's thunder, but this is a special thank you to the Carnegie Mellon University School of Music, in the fact that they're donating 300 tickets to us at a face value of $3,000 for all of our students and their parents and chaperones to take advantage of a concert at the end of this month. So we're very grateful to Carnegie Mellon for their continued partnership and investment in our arts education program.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity for our students. Okay, and number 14, is this due to not using any snow days?
Mrs. Khaleesi, this doesn't have anything to do with the snow days. In order for us to meet the state requirement for the number of days in session, we need to use an Act 80 day for our seniors because they get let out earlier. And this is an item that we've brought to the board every year since I've been here.
Yeah, I'm just curious, why don't we just adjust it so that you don't have to bring it as why can't we adjust the calendar so you don't have to bring this? Can you do that?
Well, the problem in terms of letting the seniors out early, if they get all the same holidays as everybody else on the calendar, there really isn't another way to adjust the calendar because they're just shy a certain number of days. Or they'd have to start the school year earlier or not have the same holidays.
But I thought if they were in school half a day, it counted for the whole day. That's why I'm
Well, if, you're right, there are some of those things, but I think we're also balancing what the academic team feels that we need in terms of the actual instruction for the seniors, as well as we're balancing the number of hours that you need to get in of instruction. Now, we can do this, and these seniors still have sufficient hours of instruction that meet the state guidelines.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Khaleesi. Dr. Hawley?
Yes, number 5, can you tell me a little bit more about what they're actually going to be doing with students?
Dr. Hawley, I would have to get you more information specifically with each one of these, but we have a process in place around these 21st century grants. Various organizations can apply for those, and they come to us and ask for letters of support. And so what we do is ask them for a commitment in terms of criteria that we have. So we will not give just anybody that wants to submit a grant a letter of support. They actually have to agree to certain criteria. And there's a sentence in here that says what that is in terms of following kind of our curricula and things like that. But I don't know exactly because they are after-school programs. But if you want to know that, we would have their proposals. I could share that with you.
Don't we have someone, oh, and this is Mrs. O'Donnell. She's the person that's going to be responsible for this? Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
And she actually goes out and visits these sites to make sure that they're doing what they said they're going to do in terms of supporting students?
I really don't know that answer.
Who knows that answer?
We have to follow up with Ms. O'Donnell.
Okay. Number 14, for number 2, under number 14, are the teachers and the staff going to be given extra time to pack up? And how many days will they be given?
Are you talking about item number 14, Dr.
Yes,
Hawley?
Yes, number 2.
The time that teachers are going to be given is this time when students will not be in school, which is why we are asking for the Act 80 day. So we are not adding on time, therefore having to pay teachers more. They're going to do this within what we're already paying them.
And so, and everybody thinks that's enough time. You think that's enough time? Okay, remember, I want everybody to remember that we are actually closing a school down. And the teachers have to pack up, and hopefully they know where they're going to be going. So they're going to have to be able to dray all of their materials to that new school. And I can tell you from experience that those days were not enough. That just wasn't enough time to pack up a building, because we were going back and forth to Reisenstein like all the way through the summer, trying to make sure that we had everything we needed to open up the intermediate site at Lincoln, at Belmar, I'm sorry, and also working very diligently with the principal at that time that was at Leamington to try and get everything we needed from there to the lower campus. So I don't know where people would think that we would have, this is going to be enough time, and that may become problematic. I just want to put that out there.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Mr. Eisler?
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. I would like to go to item number 6 and delve a little bit more into this. And Mr. Weiss, have you been involved in this negotiations at all dealing with this? And have you seen any of the legal documents that we may have to sign as a school district? Satisfied with everything?
Well, the authorization approves the arrangement. There are issues with the contract that I've shared with the principal that we've got to resolve.
Yeah, basically, what we're paying in this fee is we're paying a swipe fee. So we do not have the credit card capability. We pay for the swipe fee. And there's a difference between what Pro Arts, which I believe was part of the Cultural Trust, or within the Cultural Trust Network, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know for certain, so I don't want to go on record, but I would like to find that out. And this company, which in their privacy agreement, their policy I'm a little bit concerned about. If they're able to use any information at all, I think it is wrong.
Well,
And I think we have to delve into this, because we are a public school district that are very concerned about confidentiality, and this board talks about it all the time. And if there is any use of any of this information for anything other than the swipe, then I think we should decline the service. I feel that strongly. Because if by doing this, people are locked into any other email services, receive any other information, or encouraged to do any other things, if there are cookies left, they're saying they're destroyed after the session. We need to ask these questions, because ticket companies are in the business of providing services long-term. I do not know this company. They may be very reputable. I do not in any way want to say anything about it. I am concerned about the privacy policy to the parents of our students and anybody who would come online to buy. And I would wonder, with the information that Dr. French gave us and the difference in cost, if maybe this company is trying to capture information for marketing purposes that the other company wouldn't have done, because they were only in the business of helping small arts organizations with the swipe fee. So I really would like some additional information from you about how you see this privacy policy affecting people who are using this service as a courtesy. I understand that we've done this in the past, but I am very concerned about the use of information without people knowing.
Well, there were a number of issues raised with the CAP administration when I saw this. Some of them were addressed in terms of the history of this and what they've done in the past and whether students would be charged, those sorts of issues. I did communicate that there were legal issues with this contract that we had great difficulty with, that being chief among them. Typically, the board approves these, and then the contract is not released until it's signed off by our department. Now, frankly, if the board would prefer to wait until those issues are resolved on paper, we can do that.
I think you have to gather additional information.
That's fine.
I mean, from a protection point of view, I think we need to know. I would hate to say we're going to enter into this and lose time if, in fact, CAPA wants to continue to use a swipe fee service company. I worry about it. It's an independent third party. And what are we giving them? So I would like to know that personally before I would vote in the affirmative, and I'm only one member. That's why there's 9 members. This could pass. Personally, I'm concerned about the use of the information. And then the second question is, are we indemnified for any misuse of the credit card by this company? And is there a provision in here, because I didn't see it, and that concerns me also, because I just don't know the company, and I don't want anybody to think that I do. I just want to make sure that we are protected, which is your role as solicitor.
We will certainly address that in advance of the meeting next week, and if these issues are not resolved, we'll advise the administration and we'll request that it be removed before the vote.
I think that those 2 items are very critical to the responsibility we have to parents, right? You don't disagree with me.
I agree totally.
Great,
and
thank you.
And there were concerns raised when I saw this.
Good, thank you. Again, I think that, it was mentioned in number 12 for Carnegie Mellon. They have done a lot of work with us over the years, the School of Music, especially with the keyboards in the classroom and other things. It's wonderful to see. I do have a question or concern every time, and this is the time of year that we get the requests for trips abroad, and it is a lot of money, and just to make sure that our students and families are protected in case something happens on an international basis that they cannot go, so that there's not a loss of money, and that we have to make sure that we're covered on, and we usually check that out.
Dr. French, I know there's insurance.
Right, and sometimes that's covered. I just want to be clear, because I think for some families, losing that amount of money, it's a chunk. So just so everybody is protected. Thank you, Mrs. Asuda.
May I take a point of order? I'm sorry, on Mr. Iser's just last comment. Mr. Weiss, I believe that insurance, it's the responsibility of the individual to buy that insurance, and that's not the district's
Yeah,
responsibility.
I'm with you. I'm with you, Ms. Shealy, but it's a question we usually ask. It's either an Eisler or McCray question, whoever has the microphone first. So I get it this year, and I get to beat them to it. It is sometimes covered by the travel agent, and that's what we like to see. It usually is dollars well spent, but again, it is not our responsibility, and I want to be, yeah, we're clear on that one too. I agree with you. But what I don't want to see is parents out a couple $1,000s because of an international incident that would prohibit the trip from taking place. Thank you.
But my passport is ready in case they need an extra chaperone. Mr. McCray.
Passport may be ready as your money ready.
Mine is, so is mine. Anyway, now that my thunder's been thoroughly stolen, I do want to elaborate a little bit more. We do, between Mr. Eisler and myself, we try to remind families that that insurance is available. That's why we bring this up every year. And to remind them to take the insurance, because these trips are phenomenal. My grandnephew went through his school district last year. He had a great time in Europe. And, I mean, London, Paris, Barcelona, come on. But let's get back to business. Number 5, how will the reorganization affect the agreements that we're having with the CBOs? Some of the schools in this list are actually closing.
I'm sorry, Mr. McCray. I didn't notice that the services are being provided to some of the schools that are closing for next year.
Stevens.
Okay, I'll have to go back to that, on that. I didn't notice that. I apologize.
And also, it's a West End school being served by the Hill District YMCA, so hopefully there's something in the West End that could serve the kids in the West End, if you want to look into that.
Fort Pitt also.
And Fort Pitt, I'm sorry, thank you. Fort Pitt is also on the list. We'll go on to number 7. We talked about the dangers of overseas travel, and the music, I can't say enough about. Thanks to CMU for that. And I believe that was all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Ms. Shealy.
Mrs. Fischetti. On number 14, did you turn me off? I think you did. No. Because you're still on.
I didn't touch it. You're on too.
Okay. Under number 2, I don't quite understand what that's doing. Is that changing the last day of school for all students?
Number 2 is changing the last day of school for students in the schools that are listed.
And I just a point that's not clear in here to me. It's just not clear. So I guess the concern I would have under that is that, I mean, we get the calendar, as families, we get the calendar at the beginning of the year, and we plan our summers based on that calendar. And I don't know which day of the week this is, but there are people who now have to make up 2 days of childcare, because these are, I guess most, or the majority of the schools on this list involve elementary age kids. And so back to a point that, forgive me, someone else made earlier, Mrs. Khaleesi, I just would like for you to think about a way to anticipate these things, and this is a weird one to anticipate, but you know, I mean, I get the calendar in August, and I make my plans for this. I start thinking about how I'm going to have childcare for the summer, and so now these people in March have to rethink that because they have a couple more days that they have to provide for childcare. So that's just my concern with that one. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you, Mrs. Shealy. Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Mrs. Zuda. Just briefly, I just want to mention on item number 8, where we're giving authorization for 2 Pittsburgh CTE students to attend the Pennsylvania State Skills USA competition in Hershey, PA. I took the opportunity to go out to the Skills USA website. Unbelievable. The different categories that they have for competition and all the categories that they have under CTE. And you can look and find out what these young men have to do, the qualifications, the things they're going to have to go through, and then you can look down the different categories. They have the traditional CTE categories, but there's a lot that are listed. There's over, I'd say 30 or 40 different categories of competition. So I'm wishing these young men good luck for when they're going up there and that they do well and represent the district well. But I think that we may want to look at that site to make sure there might be some other areas that we want to look into as far as providing opportunities in CTE in the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. We'll move on. Okay, Dr. Holly, go ahead.
I just want to ask one more question. I'm sorry, for number 14. These are, item number 2, these are all the schools that are closing. Am I correct? And moving? Well, Obama's not on here. And that's, you're talking about almost 800 kids, 6 to 12. Okay? All right.
Dr. Holly, I've noted your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the Committee on Business and Finance. Mr. Camarda, you have 2 additions.
Yes,
They're
thank
in
you.
your green folder.
There are 2 items related to the purchasing resolutions affecting technology, and we have one other item, it would be item number 3 for the purchase of insurance coverage, and they're in your folder.
Where would the wireless, where would that fit, Mr. Camarda? I'm sorry, just for clarification.
That would fit in the first blue section that you have in your packet, and it has, I think it's the 3rd page, has March resolutions. There's one resolution there already for software named Parchment, and these 2 items will be added at the legislative meeting, will be added to those.
Okay, so it's A3. Okay, thank you. Mrs. Clazy.
Mr. Camarda, I spoke for a moment with Mr. Campbell about how to maybe identify what items should go through first the Business and Finance Committees before they even came here. At one point in time, we used to take the whole business agenda and go over it in our Business and Finance Committee's subcommittee meeting, just so we didn't have that kind of issue. Do you think that we could begin that from this point on?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're back to Section A, numbers 1 through 7, because we have a new one. And Mr. Brentley, we'll start with you. Mrs. Khaleesi.
Well, the question is going to be, and I'm sure Mr. Eisler will repeat it again, again, last-minute tabs are coming forward, and it doesn't give us the opportunity to actually read it and think about it before we come in here. And one was already explained to us, and I did ask Mr. Campbell to help me understand these other 2 because they were rather large. So if I could ask Mr. Campbell to do that at this time, I would appreciate it.
I would be happy to. The first item is the district-wide wireless installation. And if you recall, earlier in the year, we gave a brief presentation about how we leverage E-rate funding. And E-rate pays up to more than like 90% of technology costs for some technology, broadband, back-end hardware, that type of functionality. This project is a $3 million project, but our share of that project is $686,000. So we're leveraging the E-rate funding to complete this project. And this is one of the surviving technology projects that we, after going through the phase 3, we scale back some initiatives. The second item, okay.
If we could stay on that one for a second, if you don't mind, okay? Just so I could have some clarification, ask you some questions. It'll just make it easier, I think, for all of
Sure.
us. So this is scaling back, and what exactly is this $680, almost $7,000 actually going to do? I know it's $3 million worth of work, but what is it actually going to do?
So currently, whenever we move PCs or install PCs, we have to do extensive cabling, costly cabling. And a part of the strategy going forward is to move to more mobile devices. So if an educator wants to use a device in her classroom, she just walks into the room or any room without having to do configurations or move kids around to the devices. The infrastructure will be there at the schools for devices.
So we're talking like those computers on a cart? Is that what you mean?
Yes, computers on carts, and it also will provide more options for educators for mobile devices. If they wanted to use, for instance, a Kindle or any other type of mobile device, we could allow that on our network in a secure fashion.
Okay, so, and the reason why this is coming to us at this point in time instead of, well, let's just start with at this point in time.
We had to do some rethinking around strategy, given the phase 3 budget reductions. And so we reprioritized all of our efforts for the next 6, 9, 12 months. And again, this is one of the surviving efforts.
Okay, so, but, okay, then let me ask you the follow-up, which I know you know is coming. So why last minute, as in not in the agenda?
And so with E-rate, you have time constraints as far as when you have to apply, when you have to submit, and when the funds have to be spent. So we have a short window that we have to actually get this work done and the vendors paid.
Okay, so, and you would really help me a lot if you would tell me what is the date or the timeline or the dates that E-rate, you have to apply, you have to, because I know there's a time period, because I remember this. There's a time period from when you apply to when you get or something like that.
I would really have to bring in our E-rate consultant because you almost need 2 PhDs to understand that process. It's a very, very arduous process.
Okay, I don't want to know the whole process. I want to know what dates, like, is it like January 1st that you have to apply and March?
I can get those dates for you.
Yeah, that's the kind of information I was hoping for.
Okay.
And I don't know if you want anybody else to touch on this one before I go any further? Okay. Okay, so then for the second one, can you give me an explanation for that one as well?
Right. E-Fund is a state-funded grant that we applied for and received funds. And this will allow us to replace our core infrastructure, which is aged 10 years. And the funds can only be used for infrastructure-type projects within a specific time frame. And I do know the time frame for this one. We have actually 90 days to get this work done. And with this funding, you either use it or lose it.
Okay, so, and again, then I'm going to ask you, why did it come last minute instead of in the agenda?
This project morphed several times. It started out as a data center, and it then became what's more realistic and what do we need to have done. And so that's why it came late.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm done in the blue.
Thank you, Mrs. Khaleesi. Dr. Hawley.
No questions.
Mr. Eisler.
Thank you. I like the fact that Mrs. Scalese says, you know, crotchety and getting into this. Mr. Campbell, I really have a lot of trouble with walk-ons, and again, I know the amount of time and effort you spend in this place. I think on some of these, and I think the question that I asked Dr. Lippert is why are we doing it now and how does it benefit the district? On the second one on insurance, we were already told about it, that the provider was late in getting the bids in, and we had to have it. It's something we have to have in place because it's liability. And this one, because you spend so much time with this board, if you could just give us a heads up that there may be a walk-on this month, it kind of would help us, because we get this, we try to decipher it, we have the option of calling you or calling Dr. Lane if we have questions. So it is not anything against you. I mean, I know the amount of time you put in here. So I thank you for that, but just giving us a heads up that E-rate's coming up and everything's going to be late would really try to satisfy us on this. I know Mrs. Khaleesi wants to say something, and I'll say it for her, and as much as you can get before the Business and Finance Committee prior to coming to the board would also be helpful.
Thank you, but that's not why I
Good, well, then keep your hand down, okay, until I'm finished. Mr. Camarda, on the purchasing report on gasoline and diesel fuel, I ask this because we usually get some explanation when we're dealing with commodities, whether it's electricity or gas to heat the buildings. Is this up or down from previous years?
It's up because of what the market is. So it is up from previous years. And I can give you some history on years of bid. I'll give back.
No, you don't need to do that. What I'm more concerned about is that, again, when you look at this, and your folks have done this really well over natural gas and electricity and other, does it pay us to go long-term in any of these contracts, or are you satisfied to do it year to year?
I think in this contract, we're best this way.
Okay.
Because of the uncertainty of what's going on in the market.
Great. And because you have no problem with colors and shadings, we're only on the light blue right now?
I think we covered all blue.
Oh, geez, I'll tell you, then we go into whatever this blue is. Yeah. I guess the question that I have in general on the bids, and it has to do with the pages dealing with a lot of schools, a lot of roofing, a lot of somewhat capital expense. How are we, again, this year versus last year, so since we're talking so much about the sustainable school district and even in some of the renovations we're doing? Are we covered in the budget without having to take any bonds? Are we able to use dollars, or is this all covered by bonds?
What we're able to do is to deliver our program this year with what you had just approved last month was a $5 million new borrowing. And we had money that we had available from previous issues that covered close to a $13 million worth of activity within the district. So we had.
I guess what I'm getting at is that we're not going into extensive high-end long-term debt to cover these projects.
That's correct. The goal of the board and the superintendent to diminish long-term debt is being followed.
And that philosophy is consistent in awarding these projects.
Correct.
I mean, we pride ourselves of having good buildings and deferred maintenance and everything, and I just want to make sure that all that is covered. And, these are things that we probably cannot put off, I would assume, but they are covered. Thank you. Thanks, Mrs. Uda.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. Mr. McCray.
Thank you. Mr. Eisler brought up a good point about the gas. Keep turning everybody's. We gotta fix. Anyway, about the gasoline and diesel, have we considered providing the diesel fuel for our school bus suppliers? I mean, we talked about it at one point in time, and there's a threshold for economic feasibility.
We work with Mr. Vassar, and I was well-versed in the contracts related to us buying the fuel, them buying the fuel reimbursement, so we're always monitoring and watching that. So
I think we don't pay a certain amount of tax or something, we're able to get a lower price, okay. And the new walk-on, I just have, the first one is E-rate, correct? The wireless installation is just E-rate. The other one is a separate E-fund, okay. And, okay. The second one, does that include the voice over IP? That doesn't work in the building?
That's the core switching.
Yeah, it talks about the
But to
telephone.
answer your question, no. It's the, how can I put it? It's the iron boxes, the core of the data system.
Right, okay, it's not the building wise, it's. yeah, I
It's not,
gotcha.
it's nothing in this
It's the
building.
foundation and not the two-by-fours.
Exactly.
Okay, that's all I had, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Ms. Shealy?
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. Could you explain the gasoline item and diesel item for me? What is that fuel used for?
It's for our fleet.
So you have a pump somewhere?
We have fuel that we have to purchase, and we have market rates. I can give you the location where the fuel's loaded at and where we're buying it from. And we have tanks over at the south side.
Okay. And are you sure that the requirement is low sulfur and not ultra low?
Not certain on.
Can you verify
Verify.
that before we sign a contract that it's not ultra low?
There's a regulation in Homeland Security that requires certain fuels for certain.
There's actually a regulation under, it's not under environmental code.
No, it's under Homeland Security.
There's also,
Oh, there's not.
in addition, there are regulations in the environmental code regarding what fuels can be used for which vehicles. So I just want to verify it's ultra low before we buy it. Mr. Eisler, thank you. And that's it for me. Oh, I did have, I'm sorry, one more. All of the roofing contracts are rejected. Could you
Yes,
explain
we're
why?
we're respecing the bids, and they'll be rebid. You'll be seeing those again.
So would I expect to see the same companies bid on them?
Oh, you may have the same companies. The specs are being changed, and you should have, you may have the same companies. They're not rejected for the companies, they're rejected for, okay.
So I wouldn't call it an error, but it was not appropriately sent out on our part.
Expectation with the prices are gonna be much lower, and we had spec'd out something we have to change in our specifications.
Thank you for explaining that to me. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Mr. Sumter?
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. The fact that we don't live in a perfect world, I think 3 business days, 4 business days is not that crucial as long as we have the opportunity to get full understanding of the item. Yes, sir, Mr. Brantley, I'll do my best. I asked the sound man to turn up the volume. Didn't mean to disturb you, sir. I was saying that we don't live necessarily in a perfect world, and that 3 or 4 business days shouldn't be that crucial if we have a week to digest and understand before we vote. And the purpose of agenda review is to go over items in the agenda before we take a vote on them. So a walk-on at a legislative meeting would be more crucial than something late that doesn't get in the mail to get to board members before the agenda review. And I think if we can avoid that time lapse between Friday and Wednesday, that if items can either be emailed or sent out, so be it. But if they come agenda review and we get a full explanation of what it is, I think that's the purpose of agenda review. Just one question, Mr. Campbell. The items that you're put before us, are they justified financially, economically, or is there a reason why we're doing this as opposed to not doing it?
Absolutely. The second item is at no cost to the district.
Okay.
And the first item, the E-Fund, is an issue of affordability. I believe at the last calculation we did for the benefit of E-rate for the district it was upwards of $20 million, that if the district had to actually pay, it would have been $20 million. So we've received $20 million worth of goods and services by leveraging E-rate.
And moving to a district-wide wireless plan, that's what this is basically trying to accomplish?
Yes.
So the same as we have routers in this room here that allow for wireless communication, and the way you see Wi-Fi creeping up in all kind of venues throughout the community, that's a technology that will help more so than hinder.
Absolutely. It can become part as a tool to assist in curriculum, as well as, and maybe at some point, the community.
That would be nice, in thinking that aside from our libraries, that or Wi-Fi available, that they can get free wireless internet in our libraries, that if at some point in time we were to offer that to school community, the parents, folks involved with the schools, that's something that I'm sure no one around this table had thought of until just this moment when you mentioned it, but it's something to look forward to in the future. Down the road, economies of scale as far as saving monies, helping the community, getting more engagement, facilitating whatever we're going to do with the technology. It's a good way to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Mrs. Khaleesi.
Thank you. Thank you. Just so you know, Mr. Sumter, we did at one point have, like, we took our older computers that, we were, replacing, and we gave them to our needy families, and we also gave them internet connectivity or access, whatever you want to call it. We unfortunately, money runs dry, and then
Fully aware of that, Ms. Khaleesi.
well,
Thank you.
because
Thank you, Ms.
you made it
Khaleesi.
sound like it was just a new
Thank you.
idea. I'm this close. Under the inquiries, Inquiry 8709, can you tell me why we need so much carton and tape? Is it because of the moving?
Yes,
Oh, that's a lot of.
moving a lot.
What if we had moving companies? Has anybody ever considered?
We would have, well, I'm not going to do Mrs. Fuller's job, but I think we're doing this in the most economical fashion
This is
within our
more
collective
economical.
bargaining agreements.
Okay, thank you.
All righty, thank you. We'll move on to Section B, Consultants and Contracted Services. It's the pink pages. There's number 1 through 3. And we'll start with you, Mr. Brentley.
Quick question on B3, CSI Corporate Security and Investigations. What does, it says to, under the description is to provide workers' comp surveillance for a 3-year period. Does this mean what it sounds like?
Yes, sir.
Surveillance
Yes, sir.
of board members?
Absolutely not.
I'm sure they're watching us.
Next time I'll let you say what it is you're thinking.
Well, does this mean for those employees who may be on workers' comp that there are some questions and this company then?
It's a strategy we've had in workers' comp for a number of years. This is not the first 3-year cycle of bids. It's the first time for this company. We've had other companies. This is considerably less expensive on an hourly rate for this company, and it's a strategy that has assisted us in our legal department and our workers' comp management as we've had issues on verifying workers' comp claims.
Wow. And I am certain, Mr. Weiss, this contract, they're working very closely with your office?
Yes.
Okay. It's scary, but I understand. So that, well, we just got to make sure that we're not trampling on anybody's rights or any other things we should not be. So I'm glad to hear you working with it. But the other part I wanted to ask questions is, it scares me because I've seen this 3 months ago. It said here that this company also has an option to renew for 3 years, and we put that in the contract?
That's a strategy that ends up being our option. It's similar to what we have with our auditors. We go out for a request for proposal, for single audit services, and when you've approved the contracts, we've had that option for renewal under satisfactory service within the parameters of the cost, and we would renew the contract for another 3 without going for a bid again.
Okay.
You would approve them for the second round of 3.
Okay, but does it necessarily mean that at the end of the 3 years that this particular company has first right to refusal for the renewal of this service?
I would suspect if we're satisfied with their service through the 3 years,
Okay.
we would more than likely bring back to you a recommendation for the renewal for 3 more.
Okay.
I
And
would
it-
suspect if we're not satisfied,
Okay.
we're going to cancel the contract much earlier than that.
And they would not have any legal standing based upon the fact that this clause was placed in the contract that they executed with the district?
They would not have the renewal until the board would approve that renewal.
Okay.
It's not automatic, you have to approve the second round of 3.
Okay. And we just started this, so we've always put these automatic renewals in?
I've been here a long time and we've done that. It's not automatic. Gives you the ability to bring back to you for a second set of 3 years.
Who initiates this provision? Is it something that we put in a contract voluntarily, or is it negotiated, or is it requested by the service provider?
It's our choice.
Okay. I read that 3 months ago when we did it for communications and marketing companies, 3 companies, automatic renewals at a time of pretty rough times, and I just think that kind of language is something we shouldn't even really include. It should be at the end of that time period. If we can shop around and get something cheaper or do it in-house, that we should have that available to us all times, and it's just, I just don't like it seeing in the contract. So-
Mr. Brentley, I'd like to clarify, those were not automatic renewals. It's the same language that you're seeing here, and we got that language through working with the people who do bids all the time. So it's been something that this district has done for a long time, so it wasn't specific to our department, as Mr. Camarda said. It's been a long-standing thing, but it's always the board's prerogative as to whether or not they're going to renew a contract. It's not automatic.
Okay. Well, as a director, the language disturbs me, and as a director, it was disturbing to have it suggested while we were laying off teachers and in such a financial crisis. Secondly, it clearly gives the impression that it knocks out other competitors, because if I have an automatic renewal on a contract of communications and marketing, which we provide those services in the district already, at the end of that, they almost have the opportunity of getting first in line.
Mr. Brentley, I have to clarify, it's not automatic.
I have the floor. And so as a board member, making the decisions and voting on that, I want to constantly show that we are open for business for everyone. No particular company has an extra edge over anybody in bidding these contracts. And so that's why there was so much concerns about that. And I still believe that that language shouldn't even be in the contract. At the end of the service, we evaluate you. If you're great and wonderful, then we open up another contract. But to be able to have somebody on a long term like that is, for me, as chair of the Women in Businesses Minority Committee, it's a little unfair. It just knocks certain people out because some of these agreements are made with developing of relationships. Smaller companies, minority-owned companies, mostly women-owned companies, well, not necessarily women because some of them were women, but the others don't have the opportunity to develop those relationships, to have that kind of a clause put in their contract. I'm well aware of what was used in the past, but it's different now because we are laying off people, we're closing schools, we're forcing all kinds of unbelievable rules on our staff, and so we have to be very, very careful as to how we automatically give folks access to our dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Khaleesi.
On B3, this too did not come through the Business and Finance Subcommittee meeting, which maybe should have. But what I was wondering was how much of the contract, I realize it's a new supplier of this service, but how much of the contract was used in the last 3 years with the last one? Do you have any idea?
I'll get that history.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious to know in dollar amount how much was actually used, or how much that contract was for, and how much it was used of it.
I think the level of the contract was the same. The rates per hour are much lower right here, but I think we had the same levels, but I don't think our usage ever reached the levels. It's one of these contracts we don't know how much we need until we have access.
No, I understand that. I guess what I'm looking for is, did you use 50 hours of their time, or did you only use 20 in those 3? And that's what I'm kind of
I'll
thinking.
report out.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Mrs. Khaleesi. Dr. Holly.
Just for clarification, for B3, you're paying them $37.50 per hour. They may not reach the threshold of getting the whole $450,000.
That's correct.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Mr.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. Mr. Weiss, on B1, and I understand that this is a company that's going to do an audit with no cost. What I just have a question when I see this, and again, I'm asking this blindly. I have no knowledge of this company. There's no cost to the district for the exploration service. In the event that the district pursues an investment-grade audit for energy efficiency improvements, the cost would be approximately $100,000. Would this company then be able to bid on that? And does this give them a leg up? And has your office seen this?
We saw the proposal process. I would have to review the document, Mr. Eisler, to see what their status is for subsequent work. I don't know that.
I mean, it's wonderful they're doing it for nothing, but again, I just want to make sure that if in fact they're in for the long haul, that they don't get a leg up because they're doing this now. So if you could just clarify that for us, it would be great.
I'll review this with Mr. Camarda.
I can answer it at the table. It's not exactly as a leg up. It was the process, and the bid was that this was part of the process. This is one step within a process. We don't owe them anything for this, but they were selected. I wasn't going to have any work begin with this investment-grade audit and then just bring you a recommendation for Schneider Electric after they completed an investment-grade audit. But during the investment-grade audit, does make them the management company.
Mr. Weiss, to review that, that's really, it's important. I mean, I just don't, excuse me, I mean, if you want to say something, say it. I just have some concerns, and I wish it would go to legal. I don't think you're doing, I just want to make sure that we're not going to get in trouble down the road by other contractors.
Well, these types of audits, there is a special provision for them it's not in the school code, it's a separate statute, and there is a proposal process that's somewhat different than other procurement practices for public bodies. I will review it and advise the board and advise Mr. Camarda if your concerns have to be addressed.
I mean, you don't think it's an unusual request then, that I'm making?
I think it's a perfectly legitimate request, and we'll provide you with.
Thank you. I just wanted to be clear that we were on the same page by the way you answered that.
Same
Mr. White.
page.
Usually you're very close, but that one you drifted a little bit with on me. And don't come back on me on that. Again, I think a lot of us are taking a look at B3, and it's an up-to contract. We used to get, and I know we still do get reports from HR about workers' comp. And I also know that we used to get reports about from year to year, and some of the things that were done by HR over time saved us money, and I'm sure that this is one of the issues that helps saves us money, as along with some of the other things that the legal office works on. Is this I'm assuming, and I'm just hoping, is this a cost-effective service?
Well, from the perspective of the law department, it is. I mean, this is used when we have a situation where there's a claimant and we have reason to believe that the individual may not be in the condition that is claimed. That unfortunately does occur. And we have a company like this does the necessary observation to provide us a report. And then when there's a hearing before the workers' comp judge, there's the information. We don't surveil everybody that files a claim. We do this in conjunction with Mr. Camarda's office when we have information that there may be an abuse of the system.
And it is cost-effective?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. Mr. McCray.
We're going to get this to work yet, aren't we? Back to B1. The last sentence says the program will be completely paid for by the funds that would otherwise be spent on utility bills. Is this a guarantee that it's basically a wash?
It's the program is an energy savings program. It takes investment, but then it drives energy savings. So the cost for them is paid for through the energy savings. We've had similar projects. You may remember the company named Noresco, and there were a lot of lighting and infrastructure changes related to that. It takes investment. We'll do a lot of evaluation from this audit that they will perform, and Mr. Weiss I'll work with him in explaining that within the response also.
That's all I had.
Thank you. Ms. Shealy? Mr. Sumter?
No comments at this time, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to C, general authorizations. They're on the yellow pages. There's C 1 through 3. Mr. Brentley, we'll start with you.
Have any at this time?
Dr. Hawley?
None at this time.
Mr. Eisler?
None at this time, thank you.
Mr. McCray?
On C2, it's a donation of, for the wellness fair. I think we thank Triad for that. And on C3, I'm not sure if I totally understand this. They're basically taking our books and recycling them for us, and it's at no cost to us because they're making some money on it.
Yes, this is around removing obsolete books. So prior to Follett coming in, we have a pretty thorough process of going through old books in book rooms, storage areas, et cetera. And at no cost to us, they come in, they do recycle it. If they're salvageable books, then they take care of that for us.
I'm just wondering if we couldn't, like, you know, they've got the dumpsters everywhere. My son tried to start that, except they ruined it. But can we just recycle ourselves and take the money and put it into PTA or PTO or something? Or
I think there's actually a reuse of the textbook evaluation that they do, so some get put back in play.
Thanks, Mr. McCray. Ms. Shealy? Mr. Sumter? Mr. Brentley?
Under the same questions Mr. McCray raised about the recycling of the books, you know, is it possible, I mean, if we have to, I'll put a motion on the floor. I'm hoping we can do it without the, before we throw out or recycle, can we make a call to the Beginning with Books program? It is a reading program, but there is something in substitute that's providing a, reading is fundamental. But can we make a call to them and just see if there's anything there that they could possibly use, and if so, we can donate it to them. Secondly, if we can make a call to the Greater Pittsburgh Literacy Council, who teaches adults how to read. Maybe there are some basic books there that would help them with the outline of the program that they teach. So if we can do that, I mean, I don't think it requires a vote, but if that's just a courtesy, we can do that. Okay, great, that's all. And that's all I wanted to make sure we make them a call. And I do have an announcement whenever we're... I just wanted to mention that, let's see, the Pittsburgh Public Schools Early Childhood Education Program's Male and Father Involvement Committee will be presenting their 4th annual March Dadness basketball tournament Saturday, that's this Saturday the 17th at Pittsburgh-Urbana, and it's open to any and everyone who's interested. Of course, they can contact Malvin Hubbard-Ale at 412-867-8907. Secondly, I know very little about the college basketball, but I've been told that the basketball tournament starts Thursday, I believe. And I don't know if it's Thursday for the women or Saturday for the women. I've been told that there's a school, Miami Hurricanes, that's in it, I believe. Okay, Miami Hurricanes are in it, and they tell me that there is a student who had a full scholarship to the University of Pittsburgh, transferred, and what it was said to me that, man, she's killing them. She is a graduate of the Pittsburgh Public Schools, I believe Westinghouse, and her name is Pepper Wilson. The number is 34. So I have to learn this whole tournament stuff. I know zero about it, but I understand she is an unbelievable player. It is a force to be reckoned with, I understand, on that basketball court. So I will check it out, and maybe if our staff, maybe for next week, if someone can pull it up, they got to have posters or a picture of her or something. And at least if they're still in the tournament, I don't know how the tournament works, but at least we can give them props at our formal legislative meeting. Thank you very much.
And to piggyback on that, one of the doctors on staff at the University of Miami is Dr. Bryson Lesniak, who is a graduate of Shenley. So he'll be looking out for her. Yeah, okay. Dr. Hawley, anything else? Mr. Summer?
Thank you very much, Mr. Azuda. For those that are watching and listening to the program, for those that are in the sound of my voice, there is the Teenie Harris exhibit that's going on at the Carnegie Museum, and it's going to be going on until the early part of April. The key is that on March the 15th, March the 22nd, and March the 29th, those are Thursdays. The museum is free of charge on Thursdays. So from 3 to 8, you can take advantage of it. You can see the exhibit and the rest of the museum. So those Thursdays, March 15th, March 22nd, and March 29th, Teenie Harris exhibit, free admission to the Carnegie Museum here in Oakland. And on March the 26th, that's the last date of register to vote for the April 24th primary. Thank you.
Motion?
Second. You don't need a motion on the agenda, but that's all right.
Meeting adjourned.